Hi, I'm Carrie Moran. Thanks for joining me today to have a little bit of talk, a discussion about ayahuasca integration, what integration is about, how we do it, the practicalities, the nuts and bolts of it. I believe that there's a lot of talk nowadays and a widespread understanding, a relatively wide understanding, that integration is something that we should do when working with ayahuasca or plant medicines. But I'm not so sure there's a real solid grasp of what integration is or what it could be. And as an integration therapist, I thought I'd share some of my thoughts about this in this little video here. So, a few things to mention that apply across the board. One is that I'm talking specifically about ayahuasca integration because that is what I work with and what I'm most interested in. But I think everything that I'm going to be mentioning about integration applies to integration of all kinds of plant medicines and indeed to integration of psychedelics in general. So, in other words, integration is an overarching process that can go across many modalities. At the same time, I find that integration is extremely different between people, between individuals, and indeed with every session or ceremony with an individual. What that person might need can differ from one integration session to the next, in a way. So, it is by no means a standard set practice. Here, do these 5 steps, and then you're going to be integrated. Instead, it needs to be tailored to the uniqueness of the particular person, the uniqueness of your psyche, the uniqueness of what the plant or the medicine is stirring up in this particular moment, and what you need in this particular moment. Therefore, general practices like, say, an after ceremony sharing circle, which is often called an integration circle, where people share their experiences. These kind of things can be great, they can be supportive, but they are by no means all there is to do with integration. And the same goes for one on one sessions with an integration therapist like myself. Sometimes that's exactly what a person needs, and other times that is not. Their integration practices are going to involve something different. So, keeping these things in mind. And finally, just mentioning that, the key recipe for integration is that you have the medicine, the energy of ayahuasca, for example, and then you have your consciousness, your psyche, your life, what's going on for you at any particular moment, and the quality of intention and effort that you're bringing to your work with plant medicine. And it's the alchemy of these two things coming together that really creates the experience. So, in bringing your full awareness to the process of preparing for a ceremony, sitting through or navigating a ceremony, and integrating a ceremony, in bringing the fullest degree of consciousness to these kind of steps, you are helping the process have an impact, the deepest kind of impact, make the greatest kind of difference for you. In other words, it's not just a substance to sit back and ingest. How you show up for the experience really matters because it is a relationship between the medicine and you that counts. Okay, so let's start off by, well, let me start off just very briefly by introducing myself. I haven't done that yet, okay? I am a depth-oriented psychotherapist. I've been in private practice 20 years, and my orientation is around depth psychology, so an understanding of the subconscious and the unconscious, an acknowledgement that these exist, and that there's more going on in a person than meets the eye, and a willingness to go below and explore all the delicious aspects of patterns and symbolism and dreams and hunches and feelings, these kind of things. Depth psychology is rooted in Carl Jung, James Hillman, a little bit of Freud also. It's looking at what's below the surface. So that's my background. Another aspect of my background is that I'm a Buddhist practitioner, and I have been for 30 years. Long before I became a psychotherapist, I was a Vajrayana practitioner, Tibetan Buddhism. So when I started working with people as a therapist, it just seemed natural to bring in these beautiful tools of meditation and awareness and working with the mind and working with the heart that Tibetan Buddhism has. So for many years, I called myself a Buddhist-oriented psychotherapist, and I combined these two modalities. Then I met ayahuasca, about 5 or 6 years ago. And it had a profound impact in my own life, first of all. Changed a lot of things for me very rapidly, so that within a year after meeting it, I was on a pilgrimage to Peru, kind of wanting to meet the medicine in her home territory. And within 2 weeks of arriving in Peru, I was realizing that I was going to be living here. So I've been living in the Sacred Valley since 2015, mostly in Pisac, but nowadays I'm living in Waran. Welcome to my home in Waran. And I work as an integration therapist with primarily ayahuasca, other plant medicines. And I work with people around the world. People call in by Skype or FaceTime or Zoom, and ayahuasca is truly spreading around the world, and I get calls from Ireland or Hong Kong or Australia. I mean, it's just kind of amazing how ayahuasca is spreading so rapidly. And obviously my own work with the medicine continues, and I've also done quite a lot of dieta, plant medicine work also, which I feel is a highly integrative path. Maybe we can talk more about that a little bit at the end. So let's start off just by inquiring into what is integration? What does this word really mean, right? And in looking at words, I like to go back to their roots, the etymology of them. So for the word integration, it comes from the Latin integrare, which has a meaning of something like to make whole, to make something complete. It also has a nice other meaning of renewing, beginning again. So words like integer and integrity are related to the word integration, and it has the overall connotation of making complete, allowing something to come into its fullness or its wholeness. So when we are working with integrating our plant medicine experiences, we are working to open up to the fullness of that experience and allowing that experience to unlock portions of ourselves that may be hidden or shut down, so that we can come into our own natural kind of wholeness. And this reminds me very much of Carl Jung and his whole lifelong perspective on the path of human growth, which he called individuation. Individuation is about moving more into your uniqueness and wholeness as a human being. It is not about becoming a better person, about becoming more perfect, about reaching for the light. It's really just about becoming more full, more whole. And part of that involves looking at the dark stuff, the shadow, the things that you've repressed, bringing them to the light of consciousness and taking them into the fullness of yourself. And that is something that I feel ayahuasca does so wonderfully with people, is very soon in our work with ayahuasca, it tends to start showing the things that we've buried or repressed or tried to push away. It brings them to the light of consciousness so that we can then integrate them. So integration in a psychedelic context in particular, my definition of this is something like integration is the process of bringing together all the various aspects of your journey, yourself, and your life at this particular time, metabolizing and digesting your experiences fully, taking in what you've been giving, claiming the realizations that you've received, and making them real in the world. Because, in my view at least, if it doesn't make a change in your life, either inside or outside, in the world, if it doesn't at least deepen your understanding, then it's just a bunch of pretty pictures. What's the point of doing this kind of work? I view this work as potentially very transformative. So claiming the realizations you've received and making them real, making changes in yourself and in your life, inner and outer, and growing into new ways of being that create increasing wholeness and deepen meaning. This is my sense of what psychedelic integration is about or can be about. It's interesting to note just for a moment that when we talk about integration in this way, this is kind of a purely Western, modern people kind of view. That traditional people, indigenous people working with plant medicines in traditions like the peyote or San Pedro or ayahuasca traditions, which can go back hundreds, if not thousands of years, they don't really have integration circles, they don't have integration therapists, they don't necessarily have words or vocabulary for integration. They haven't articulated it to the extent that I've been laying it out here. And I think this is due to a few factors. One is that indigenous people, traditional peoples, tend to be better connected to themselves, to each other, to the community, to the plants, certainly to nature, than we are in a fragmented way. So that integration is a process that can just happen more naturally and spontaneously in life. Integration might happen when they're sitting on the riverbank fishing after a ceremony, or swinging in a hammock smoking a pipe. It doesn't require a lot of production or a whole lot of thought. It can be an organic sort of process. Whereas for us, special Western people, who tend to be disconnected, fragmented, not really know much about the world outside, certainly not the natural world, and really not know much about ourselves on the inside either, because there's so much we've blocked, pushed away, been afraid of. Conscious integration becomes a much more necessary thing, because in working with ayahuasca or plant medicine, we're suddenly faced with all this material. It's like, what is this about? Where did this come from? What does this have to do with me? So integration in large part can be that process of synthesizing and refining our understanding, metabolizing and digesting the material that's come up. And it requires us to show up completely and consciously, as I mentioned earlier. So a few examples of what integration work can be. One thing I could say is that integration work is the process of growing into new ways of being, okay? As we translate our insights into direct action. So there's the whole inner level of integration work, thoughtfulness and reflection and journaling and working with our dreams, investigation, making sense of things that have come up, discerning patterns, receiving new understandings, right? And then there's the whole level of action that integration can show up in the world as action, not just internal reflective processes. An example of integration might be the decision to surrender an old habit, right? Or to start a new behavior. Integration might involve shifting your perspective to grow into some new ways of being. It might involve making a decision, taking an action in the world about a relationship or your life or your work or your home. Could be a big decision, could be a small decision, could be a number of different things. Integration can be about refining your perceptions into a more generous understanding of a situation or another person. Having a little more compassion, having a little more wisdom or insight about what's really going on. Integration can be about initiating a conversation that you realize you need to have with somebody. Integration can very much be learning new ways of working with yourself. Learning how to relax the inner critic inside of you, or to work with that part of you in a different way. Learning how to communicate more gracefully. Learning how to treat yourself more compassionately. Learning how to feel and love and release buried feelings that you've been carrying around your whole life. All these are examples of integration, and there can be so many more, yeah? And integration can be viewed in 3 stages. These are kind of 3 aspects or facets of integration that I've noted, and these are not necessarily sequential stages, but they can be intertwined in your work with ayahuasca. The first stage that I note happening with people early on, and also in my own experience, is sort of what I call cleaning up your act, right? Ayahuasca comes into your body and it sweeps through and it checks out everything, and it can let you know pretty clearly sometimes, you can't do that anymore, right? You have to quit eating this kind of food, or you have to quit smoking this kind of substance, or you have to stop doing a particular kind of behavior. I remember ayahuasca told me very early on, like, you got to stop swearing. You can't do that anymore. So it's kind of an upgrade in terms of your diet, your mindset, your habits, your work, your relationships, your energy. Especially in the first round of ceremonies, ayahuasca can really help us accelerate and upgrade in this aspect of our lives. And then there's another phase that comes on, which lasts for quite a long time. I'm not done with it yet. And that is about assimilating unconscious material, right? The plant goes in and shows us things that have been buried or repressed or pushed away, and we need to learn to first tolerate these feelings, and then understand these feelings, and then finally integrate these rejected aspects of ourselves. Often these can be emotions, buried pain or anger or sexual energy or indications of trauma that have happened in the past. All these need to be assimilated into our lives as part of our path of wholeness. Finally, there's this facet that I call bringing soul to the world, okay? And this is about connecting, learning to connect with the world and with nature and with other people and with the divine in new and deeper and more intimate ways. It's about cultivating a way of being that's in touch with what really matters. And it's about showing up as our true selves more and more and bringing our gifts to the world. So bringing soul to the world can involve all of these things. And again, this process is not like first you do cleaning up your act and then you assimilate unconscious material and then you learn to bring soul to the world. These can all be intertwined in ayahuasca work. And there are probably more aspects, but those are 3 big ones that I've noticed. So finally here for today, I just want to talk a little bit about specific integration strategies, tools, skillful means, as the Buddhists say. Again, there's no one recipe or formula that pins down what integration is. It depends on what you need at a particular time and how you can find it. So some key integration practices that I found. One is meditation or spiritual practice. And if you're going to pick one thing to do as an integration practice, it might well be to cultivate a meditative and or spiritual kind of practice, because this provides the overarching framework, the view through which you start to see life, you start to see your medicine experiences, you start to see everything in a different way. Meditation is really just about working with your awareness, right? It's about meeting your experience honestly and fully and compassionately and completely, sitting there on the cushion or walking or whatever you do as part of your meditation practice. And meditation is not just about the head. I meet so many people who say, I can't meditate because I just have thoughts that keep coming. Meditation is not about stopping thoughts. It's just about developing a different relationship with them. So meditation in that sense is certainly about the mind and mental awareness, but it's also about the body, and it's also about the heart, and it's also about embodied emotional experience. As Pema Chodron says, meditation practice is not about trying to throw ourselves away and become something better. It's really just about befriending who we are already. So the intimacy and the love and the awareness that we can cultivate through meditation is a huge tool in integration practices. Another integration practice that can be really useful for people can be a bit simpler to practice because it's something we know already. It's just journaling, okay? Writing about your medicine experiences the morning after, keeping an integration log and writing about your experiences as they arise. And they don't have to be just medicine experiences. They can be life experiences brought to your integrative path. This is a way of helping yourself make sense of what's going on. It can be a way to clarify your thoughts. It can be a way to recognize patterns and to unlock deeper understandings. Sometimes, often I don't realize I'm thinking something or feeling something until I write it, right? So journaling also creates a record for the future where you can go back and look at the work you've done with a particular plant or medicine and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that insight, or oh, I realized that and I didn't do anything about it. Maybe now is the time for me to do something about it. So journaling is a major integrative tool, I feel. And if you don't like to write, you can always just speak your insights and understandings into, a notes app, voice memo app or something like that. Dream work is a key integrative practice because just as ayahuasca works with the unconscious and subconscious, our dreams are arising from that very state. I see a distinct parallel between ayahuasca work and dream work. And dream work is a way we can access this state every night without having to go to a ceremony or drink medicine. So cultivating the practice of recording your dreams and then working with the patterns and the insights that you see arising in them, I feel is very important for integration, or can be. Another major integrative practice I'd like to mention, time in nature, okay? Just spending time outside, on the ground, on the earth. In your garden, in your backyard, in a park, in the woods, walking in the mountains if you have the fortune to live in a place like that, spending time connecting with plants, animals. I mean, even tame animals, pet animals like dogs or cats are aspects of nature, right? Sometimes they're the biggest connection with nature we have in our homes. But spending time in nature, consciously just breathing and looking and observing and being is such a beautiful meditation. It's such a grounding thing for people who are working with plant medicine, and it's a way to reconnect and rewire our beings onto this planet, which is so important at this time. There are many, many more integration practices, embodiment practices, breath work and dance and energetic work, creative practices, giving your experiences form in terms of drawing or painting or dancing or singing, music, anything, shadow work, prayer, emotional intelligence, cultivating compassion, learning to investigate inside. I have a free PDF on my website. It's called 17 Ways to Integrate Ayahuasca Further. And if you'd like to take a look at that, please go to my website. It's called ayahuascawisdom.com. Sign up for the mailing list, and you'll get the free PDF. You'll also be on my mailing list, but I tell you, I do not send things out that often. So, and when I do send things out, are usually like a blog post or something like that. So hopefully that might be something that you're interested in. So there's more I'd like to talk about here around examples of integration, cases of what people have actually worked with in my experience in integration sessions, for example, just to give more real-time examples of what is possible. But I think I'm going to put that in a second video here. So thanks for joining this part, and I hope to see you in part 2.